Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. That's my guy.
Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Thursday evening. Hello, week's been a little crazy over here. Not Tuesday, it is Thursday. Here to talk some external free agents that the Chargers could potentially add to the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, I did a solo video about some offensive linemen. So today we're going to talk about some weapons the Chargers could add, some receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And of course, joining me to do that is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. Excited to talk about these names that we have prepared for everyone. And in true fashion, there's a lot of names missing from this list because everyone's going to want us to chase the big names. At the end of the day, there's a bit of a realistic take here, but I like the names that are on here. And finally, it's been a minute. This is season 7 for us, but it's the first time I've really gotten into guys I had draft priors on. So it's fun to now go through this list and see who's, good, who's bad, who's intriguing, and all that.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys on here that both you and I liked coming out of the draft, whether that was a few years ago or, whatever the case may be. So it's a very interesting group. Obviously, a lot of fans pointing towards, adding a wide receiver or adding a running back. Lots of Breece Hall conversations again. Breece Hall will not be featured today, you guys. So I think in general, before we get started, I think you and I are of the same mindset that this is a really good opportunity for the Chargers to solidify the tight end spot. And if they're going to be active in the wide receiver or running back markets, we're looking for more specific skill sets as opposed to bigger names that a lot of people might be thinking, both because we have a lot of faith in the young receivers and running backs that are on this team. And I think that kind of sets the foundation for how we will approach this kind of show and adding any kind of external free agents going forward.
Yeah, they established quite a bit last year, and I guess the year prior. So yeah, you have not that they're unupgradable options, but Trey Harris, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnson, TBD. So we're not necessarily looking for like a wide receiver one as much as a good complementary skill set. You have Gadsden now. I think we all feel good about him as like the tight end one in terms of receiving. How do you complement that? You have Hampton, you have Vidal. So who complements that? So there's no really big swings here. It's just who can we get to kind of plug and play in potentially 1 year with McDaniel and get going pretty quick.
Yeah, my personal belief is that they have the bulk of their starters, in terms of the skill players set, and you're looking for filling in the roles behind that. I know that's not a popular take, especially in regards to Quentin Johnston, but I think you and I are both extremely bullish on Trey Harris and Ladd McConkey. I think showed on film a much more productive and efficient player than he was given the opportunity to. So I'm definitely expecting a big, bounce back season for Ladd McConkey to kind of set that in motion going forward. So before we get to some of these external targets, of course, I have to give a quick shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. And it is our proud sponsor of the show. This episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. So PrizePicks is super easy to use. All you have to do is pick one player, 2 players, 3 players, and all you have to do is pick more or less on any given statistical category, whether that's the NBA, college basketball, obviously in full swing, hockey still, right around the corner after they get back after the Olympic break here. Obviously, baseball is a few months away from beginning, so whatever sport floats your boat, you're able to get in there on the action, and PrizePicks is available in over 45 states, including California, Florida, and Georgia. So best way to do that is to download the PrizePicks app, use the code GUILTY at checkout to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code GUILTY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, let's get started here. We're going to focus first and foremost on some wide receivers. And I think you and I are both on the same page. And I think the league is going to be on the same page that Rashid Shaheed is going to be a very rich man after being one of the best and most explosive playmakers in the NFL over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, it was a UDFA due to some injuries, but is by all accounts now what he was advertised as. 33 yards per kickoff return, second in the NFL this past season, 2 touchdowns, fourth in yards per punt return with a touchdown, 2023 All-Pro, and also chipped in tremendously as a receiver. 59 catches, 687 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3.1 yards after the catch per reception, 1.4 yards per route run. This is a 2 birds, 1 stone thing that doesn't quite break the bank. And when we talk about some of these contracts, not that anybody here is really expensive, but try to look at it more maybe like where they rank in their contract versus the numbers, because we can get caught up in how many millions of dollars there are. Then you look at kind of where they rank, it's not as bad. So we'll get to the contract in a second. But the Chargers need, I think you and I agree, and a lot of fans would agree, other than maybe finding a Justin Jefferson, which would be nice, but not happening. Other than happening, they need a true vertical threat and speed, and they need a returner. And I think this is clearly by far and away the best 2 birds, 1 stone, most proven free agent option. And a big splash that I think you and I would feel pretty good about. Elite return game value, obviously. He was clocked in at 21.72 miles per hour on, I think, like an 80-yard touchdown this year. Plenty fast. I think he didn't test at the combine, but 4.2 kind of speed was sort of the rumor. And again, we one of the 10 or 11, I guess, fastest guys in the NFL this year. He's fast. No. 2 season-ending injuries going back to college is a bit of a risk. The contract is 3 years, $42 million, which would make him wide receiver 29 in terms of APY.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, fortunately, depending how you want to look at things, if you look at his usage in Seattle, it was definitely more of a scarce opportunity, signing for him. Whereas in New Orleans, he was like he was their wide receiver 2. And in Seattle, he was probably more of their wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 kind of type. And so I think that probably does bring his value down a little bit on the open market. But I think this solves both of their problems that we're looking for in both regards. I was looking to see if he had many like design rushes, and he didn't really have many of them. So this isn't like a full like Deebo Samuel situation where you're going to like hand him the football a lot. I think you probably could design him more screens than he was given the opportunity to show. Just given his speed again there and some jet sweeps, I think is more than okay. So the durability maybe might be a concern there for the Saints or for the Seahawks or whatever. But I think in terms of the verticality and the returner ability, this is the best bang for your buck you could possibly get. We haven't really seen the Chargers be aggressive at that position, the returner spot that is, in terms of free agency. So, we never know if that really is like where they would want to go sign or go find this role, find an upgrade over Darius Davis. But if they're going to, Rashid Shaheed is easily the best option.
Yeah, just looking at some of the numbers they didn't get to last year, like Devontae Adams, like how much are they willing to go up for versus not go for? Reportedly in that Adams race, but he was 2 years, $44 million. Shaheed, 3 years, $42 million. Again, this really just strikes me as not that he's cheap, but he is wide receiver 29. It's a good kind of value thing. I think McDaniel and Herbert, I mean, we say this all the time, right? But I mean, come on, McDaniel and Herbert, that is the best situation this guy would have ever have. I don't know how much you get in terms of targets because again, you have Gadsden, you have Harris, you have McConkey. Yeah. So, Atticus in the chat saying, we can do without Shaheed. I would get that. At the same time, if, half the contract is for returner, the other half is what you chip in as a receiver, I think it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to, whatever receiver you're paying in free agency, you're not going to get like 1,000-yard receiver. And I think that's a big reason why I would push back against like an Alec Pierce signing or a Romeo Dobbs signing or something like that. Like a lot of Chargers fans want them to go sign, all these big name wide receivers. And I get it, like good players. Alec Pierce would be awesome in this offense, but you're going to have to pay Alec Pierce $25 million per year to pull him away from Indianapolis. And then you're never really going to get him to be worth that kind of contract with this kind of offense and with the amount of players that are in it and, just how Justin Herbert likes to spread the ball around a little bit. So I think, $42 million total for Rashid Shaheed as your wide receiver 4 or 3, depending on how things sort out, I think is okay. This is pretty similar to like the Darnell Mooney contract that the Falcons signed him to. And it's been, this last season was a little bit more down, but the previous season was a bit more up. And so that's kind of the production that you're looking for. And I think if you sign Rashid Shaheed or somebody in this same kind of realm where you're paying more, like, 12 to $15 million, you do have some nice insurance if you decide to let Quentin Johnston leave in free agency next year, or if you don't pick up his 5th-year option, and then you can roll into 2027 with Trey Harris, Ladd McConkey as your 2 and your 1, and then Rashid Shaheed or whoever could be your 3 after that, and you just are nice and settled at receiver for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm all for this one. This was the first name I thought of if you mentioned free agency.
Yeah. So it's certainly not a unique take. I've seen a lot of people talk about Rashid Shaheed. It just again would be the best boom for their investment to solve these 2 spots. Next one on here, I put Jalen Naylor, the wide receiver 3 from the Minnesota Vikings. Much different vertical receiver than Rashid Shaheed in terms of his speed. He's more of a 4.5 guy at the combine. But if you look at his RAS, he actually has like 98th percentile, 10 yards and 20-yard split. And then for whatever reason, his 40-yard, like the 40-yard split is like 67%. So he is definitely one of the more productive vertical wide receivers. He was 15.3 yards per reception this past year, 14.4 in 2024. So he makes the most out of his limited opportunities with, the amount of characters and receivers that are in Minnesota. And of course you have the JJ McCarthy aspect of that this past season, and Carson Wentz, and like dealing with that whole not great situation. So he had 29 receptions in total this year, and 8 of them went over 20 yards. So this is a guy who gets vertical. He can do the contested catch aspect of things. He can, do the deep post, and he is a very capable vertical wide receiver, and that's been proven over the last couple of seasons. This past season, he was 75% contested catch ability as well. So I think Quentin Johnston took a really nice step in that regard this past season. He was more about like the 50% range, which is still, above average at this point in the NFL. But 75%, again, limited targets there. It's not as many as Quentin Johnston, but this is a guy who can win vertically with speed. He can win vertically, on the boundary. And I think settles into a really nice role again, similar to like that, Rashid Shaheed kind of type, where you don't have to worry about, paying this guy $25 million per year and not maximizing that contract. You're probably paying him like $12 million ish. And that's wide receiver 3 money at this current state and time in the NFL. So I think this is a underrated option for the Chargers if they do want, kind of a veteran wide receiver 3 to come in and open up some things over the top. And Jalen Naylor is used to that very role, doing the same thing for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones and all those guys in Minnesota.
Yeah, I watched way too much Vikings second half offense this year because of Prize Picks, and it worked out very well for me. And Naylor popped up several times. It felt like if they needed a bucket, sometimes they could go to him. I liked bringing up the 10-yard split here. Obviously, having a 70th percentile 40, not the greatest thing in the world, but as you said, the 10-yard split. McDaniel said it's not necessarily about being the fastest. It's do you play, are you quick? Right. That's the most important thing. And that 10-yard split is a very big deal. McDaniel wants these guys to be open early, not necessarily how fast they are when they're 15, 20 yards down the field. So if he can get open early, be quick early, that's good. It is crazy that this wide receiver 3 money is $12 to $13 million when like the top center will get $20 million. Like Linderbaum gets $20 million this offseason, but
it's insane.
It is what it is. So I don't necessarily mind this. I believe of the guys we have on here, Shaheed and Naylor would be the 2 that are the more like premium options that we have. If I'm not mistaken. I don't recall the entire list. In the case that they sign either Shaheed or Naylor, this is bye-bye Quentin Johnston territory.
Probably. I think you could entertain trade conversations for this upcoming season. I don't know what Quentin Johnston fetches you on the open market. They did the whole crowded wide receiver room this past season, and so they're definitely not afraid to do that again. If you sign one of these guys, it definitely is, Keenan Allen is probably not coming back at that point in time. But I think, you could let him play out his, existing contract. You decline the 5th-year option, and then next year you let him walk in free agency. I think that wouldn't be like the craziest thing. Again, I know I'm higher on Quentin Johnston than a lot of the fan bases, but the Ravens do this all the time where they sign like a mid-level free agent the year before, and then the next year they let the draft pick walk in free agency. And you're hoping for a compensatory pick at that point in time. So it wouldn't be the craziest thing to me if they let him, play out his contract. I would still be a little surprised if they actually traded him and were able to get like, some people. I've seen some people online suggest like a 3rd round pick. I don't know, man. I feel like your best bet with Quentin Johnston is you hold on to him, hope he produces like a really effective season this year, and he gets enough targets and volume to maybe convince somebody to give him $18 million in free agency kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's had a more productive season than Josh Palmer's ever had. And Josh Palmer got what, 13 million from the Bills. So and Johnson's been healthier too. So yeah, I'm just curious how you felt there. A lot of Keenan Allen going public and saying he wants to be back with the Chargers. I don't recall. I mean, obviously
he is pushing to be back for sure. I think he knows what next year could be like for sure.
Yeah, pushing to be back. I realized the Chargers just today dropped Keenan Allen's like path to the record video in February. I don't know. Just the things that start to click over and over and over and over again in your mind, and you've seen it enough times just to wonder.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm of the mindset that they should get younger at the wide receiver position, continue to do that, and younger and cheaper as much as you can. But yeah. Thomas points out that they could sign QJ to a short-term extension in lieu of the 5th-year option, like the Packers did with Christian Watson. I think that wouldn't really surprise me either.
I don't remember what was Watson's contract. What did that look like? 1 year extra? Oh yeah, 1 year contract extension. 13.25 million. Chargers fans will die.
If they extended him for 2 more years or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's still really popular in that locker room, and Jim Harbaugh still really likes him. So
100%.
And he was a good player this year. He just like the entire wide receiver room just did not get enough opportunities in the second half of the season.
No, not at all.
Yeah. The random guy points out the Ravens did the same thing with Rashad Bateman. So,
yep.
So there's been a lot of fans again kind of connecting the McDaniel dots towards Juwan Jennings or towards Deebo Samuel, as JSJ points out here. Do you have any thoughts about those two? Because they did not make our slideshow, but they are connected to McDaniel. So any thoughts about either of those two players?
I don't know what Juwan Jennings' contract situation is projected to be. I'm assuming it's pretty pricey. Deebo, I just that feels like a mess. I don't really want to touch at this point. It's not an Ayuk situation, but yeah. I'm okay.
No, that's more of a health thing. Like I just have you have no idea. Like, is he going to give you 4 full games, or is he going to give you 17? There's just no chance. And so PFF has him projected as 2 years, $32 million. Like, I don't know, man. Like, he checks a lot of the boxes that we're talking about here with like his ability to carry the football and return. Like, he was a great kick returner this year as well, which I think does add to some value for him. But it's just the injuries, man. Like, there's been so many of them over the last few years, and now he's getting up there in age, and it's just I'm not super interested in seeing what that looks like this year.
What's the 49ers contract situation? Like, they wouldn't bring Jennings back themselves. Who do they even have at this point?
Wide receiver, not a lot, because Brandon Ayuk leaving for sure.
Yeah,
they have Ricky Pearsall. I think that's pretty much.
They have $43 million in cap space, which I'm sure there's other stuff they got to do too. But
because Juwan Jennings is a free agent, Kendrick Bourne is a free agent. I mentioned the Ayuk thing. Sky Moore, who we'll talk about here in a second, is a free agent. So they don't have a lot of bodies in the receiver room right now.
Yeah, but Deebo seems like a no to me, and Jennings, I'm open to it, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah, Jennings will cost a lot. He's going to cost a lot. He's a very productive receiver, blocks well. Yeah, he'll have if San Francisco lets him leave, he'll have a lot of options, I think.
Yep.
All right, this is where we get into some returner categories here. So, yes, this is going to be quite of a drastic difference here between the first two, as well as going forward here. D. Eskridge is probably, I think, on the Chargers' radar, just given the McDaniel connection, as well as the Sanjay Law connection from their days in Seattle. There's not a lot of wide receiver production here, to be fair. And even the kick return numbers are not great. There's no punt return production hardly at all. But he had the second most kickoff returns at 25.9 yards per return, which is actually better than Darius Davis by like a pretty good amount. So he's a very experienced kick returner. When he was drafted, he was kind of drafted as one of those, vertical, speedy gadget kind of guys, and he's never really shown that. But the Dolphins did sign him in free agency, and he has the connection to Sanjay Law. So this is a kind of just like keep it on your radar, but I don't know how interested I am in this aspect of or this player, I should say.
Yeah, there's a couple names on here that are just, we need a returner. We need some sort of competition. With Darius Davis, I get it. If you want to see, I suppose, what another offseason of him maybe not being hurt can do. Ryan Ficken is very much so tied to him. But last year he said, if we have an opportunity to upgrade, we will do that. We think the world of Darius Davis. It's his job, but we will upgrade if we need to. And it was just really bad for Davis. So if you have him, I get it. But if you want to bring in someone like Eskridge, and that's kind of the max effort you have to bring in a real competition for returner, fine. I would get it. Good to have this name on here, not because he's going to transform the offense, but because it's probably likely he ends up with the Chargers as a competitor.
Yeah. Just to make this clear about Darius Davis, I don't have any sources here, but if you look at Darius Davis's statistics as a returner over the last couple of seasons, his rookie season, electric. Obviously, we all know that he won the Chargers a game like by himself that year. Averaged 16.0 yards per punt return, had a touchdown, long of 87, had a couple of others go over 40. 2024, 12.4 yards per punt return, long of 53. So still effective, but not nearly as explosive. 7.0 yards per punt return this past season. So he went from 16 his rookie season to 7 this past season. And the kick return was not, it was not much better. 25.6, this past season, according to PFF, after averaging 27.3 last year as a kick returner. So it's just not, the decline is significant. And I think I think there's some, I've always felt like there's untapped potential for him as a wide receiver because they never play him unless he's, there's no other choice. But he just didn't look like he was his former explosive self this past season. And so you're trying to win a Super Bowl, man. And we just saw Rashid Shaheed give the Seahawks a ton of value. The Patriots with Marcus Jones got a ton of value from it, of having a high-end kick returner, punt returner type. So I do think that at minimum, Darius Davis will have legitimate competition this season. Whether that is a free agent or a draft pick, I think remains to be seen. But he is going to have to earn his right to be on the roster, and I would not be surprised if he ends up getting cut.
Oh, me neither. He was, you mentioned last year's production. He was hurt to begin the season. He tried to come back. Then they didn't really do anything with him. And then eventually it got a little bit better as he returned from injury. But then this year, another slew of injuries, and he just looked stuck in mud. It's sad, but you can't, he's not a very big guy, but you can't be me and slow. And then you're just me. So please don't, it just didn't look good. Part of it maybe could have been the blocking, but just everybody else had a better return output than him. And it just didn't look good. He looked indecisive. He looked slower. He looked hurt, whatever you want to call it. It's not the guy that they drafted. So it's unfortunate because he was electric, but it just feels like his time is kind of running out. When you are dependent so heavily on your role being very fast guy and you're not that anymore, it's a short time in the NFL for you at this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of the highest, most effective kick returners, not all of them, obviously, because like Debo and Rashid Shaheed were very effective kick returners.
Sure.
But a lot of the other higher level kick returners have kind of pivoted towards running backs. Like, they're essentially running schemes out there on this new kick return. And so somebody like Darius Davis that is vertically fast, but doesn't have the best change of direction, and is not used to running through traffic in the same way, maybe isn't the best option as the kick returner. Not to say that D. Eskridge is, but given the connections, I think he's worth mentioning.
Yep.
Somebody else that has connections to the Chargers through Baltimore is Mr. Devin Duvernay, who spent this past season in Chicago.
I feel like this was a name back in the day when I was listening to maybe you and Jason talk about receivers. This is a name you guys brought up from the pre-draft process back when
Jason
I was like,
loves Devin Duvernay.
that's what it was. The name just sticks out in my mind. I didn't know anything about these guys. I just remember that name being brought up over and over again. 26.8 yards per kickoff return, tied for 11th in the NFL. 12.1 yards per punt return, tied for 11th. Again, much better than what the Chargers had. He's a two-time Pro Bowler and a 2021 first-team All-Pro kickoff returner. I know, guys, it's not the most fun receiving option, but again, they are looking for options that maybe provide some speed. Maybe there's a connection, but also they can return. Given the room that the Chargers have, is he an upgrade over Davis on offense? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Davis really is on offense. It could be interesting with Mike McDaniel, but how much of an upgrade is he? I don't know. Not really a whole lot of risk for this one, but I do think he is a better overall option for them than the pure McDaniel tied Eskridge.
Yeah, if you can't get Rashid Shaheed and you want a veteran returner, this is probably the one I think you're bringing up. And I think, you know, his production is very consistent over the last few years. 2021, he was first team All-Pro because he had 2 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. So he hasn't had like the touchdown production of a Rashid Shaheed, but you look at the consistency in which he is getting the Bears and the Ravens, past the average mark, I think is significant. So with how these teams are approaching the kickoff, again, if you're fielding it at the 5 and you get 26 yards, you're obviously starting your drive at the 31 as opposed to like the 22 where the Chargers were starting so often this past year. So any of this hidden yardage that you can find is just so important. And the Athletic Football guys have talked about this, where if you get a really good return and if you can start your drive at the 40-yard line, you're 2 first downs into Cameron Dicker's field goal range. Like, that is it. You're one explosive play from being in the red zone. So it just gives them such an added benefit to have this kind of player. And I think, with Duvernay in particular, is he going to light the world on fire in terms of the offense? No. But the Ravens did give him a lot of jet sweeps. Like the Bears didn't. The Bears reserved that role for DJ Moore, so he very rarely played on offense. But when he was in Baltimore, he was used pretty effectively as like a jet sweep, ball carrier. So I do think that there could be some, more potential on offense than he showed with Bears. I'm not ever going to say he's going to be like an elite receiver by any means, but can he give you, 200 yards receiving and 150 yards rushing on the season? I think that's probably like in the cards if you like really featured him more. So not my favorite option in terms of returners, but I think he deserves to be on the list at this point.
Yeah, definitely a more viable, this guy can do something for you on offense option than at least Darius Davis.
Yeah, I agree. Still just 28 as well. All right. Next on here, another wide receiver kick returner type. You and I and Arjun in Vegas were so mad when the Chiefs drafted Sky Moore. And I know the Chargers fan base was largely mad at that as well. Viewed as a slam dunk pick. And it just frankly did not work out in Kansas City. And the 49ers very rarely used him as a wide receiver either. But he was a significantly better returner than I thought he was going to be, because he didn't start out his career returning kicks or punts or anything like that, and ended up averaging this past season 26.9 yards per kick return, which is tied for 10th, so just a smidge higher than Devin Duvernay, and then 10.2 yards per punt return, which was 17th. So nothing like world breaking there. The punt returner is probably less effective from him as a kick returner, but 10th versus whatever Darius Davis is giving you is a pretty significant boost there. Reclamation project as a wide receiver. We've seen a lot of the Shanahan guys kind of go find these, reclamation projects and turn them into something, or a 6th-round pick or whatever. And just given the scheme familiarity with him being with Kyle Shanahan this past season, I think there could be a potential here for your wide receiver 4 kind of role. Just a low cost kind of player. You're probably paying him $3 to $5 million and not much else. And you get your returner spot solved and potentially, some added boost at wide receiver.
That was a really funny time, that draft period. I remember there were some people just like, why take Chris Olave when you can get Sky Moore? I think he's a better player. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he's like that. I don't know. But I definitely did not see this outcome for Sky Moore who's had his struggles with the Chiefs. And it's a little troubling. I know he hasn't spent a ton of time with the Niners, but I mean, the Chiefs and the 49ers have needed receivers for like 3 years now. And Sky Moore not be able to make a huge dent in either spot there is a bit troubling. So that's concerning. Obviously, I don't think you suddenly get Herbert McDaniel and it's like, wow, this was the place the whole time after Andy Reid, Mahomes, and Shanahan and the Niners. I don't know how much there really is there to mine outside of us just scraping for draft priors. I like Sky Moore fine, but I wasn't like head over heels for him.
Yeah.
We all thought we were screwed when the Chiefs got him because it seemed like it was perfect. But, you know, it is what it is. That was, I think, half the year the Chiefs kind of were 50-50 on their picks. Could be wrong. So, sure, returner sounds great. Upgrade there. He chips in as a receiver, sick. But this is mostly a returner option here.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall, Kylan points out the Iowa kick returner, gadget guy, Caden Wetchen from Iowa. So I think overall, I do prefer them adding in the draft if they're going to add another wide receiver. But that's just me.
Yeah.
Okay, before we continue, our audio audience is going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with some tight end free agents that we could potentially see the Chargers targeting right after this. All right, first one here, of course, have to bring up the Baltimore connection, Mr. Isaiah Likely. Seems very likely, no pun intended there, to actually hit free agency. Greg Rosenthal interviewed him at the Super Bowl Media Row and said that the impression that they all got publicly was that the Ravens are not going to match his contract offers, which kind of makes sense, just given that they, extended Mark Andrews, which I still don't quite understand. It was very un-Ravens-esque to choose Andrews over Likely, but he's probably hitting free agency, and the Chargers, I think, should be in the conversations with him.
There's no way they're not in the conversations with him, given the connections with Joe Ortiz and everything. Look, I forget what was the last show or the previous shows that we had done. Someone said, stop bringing up connections when talking about these guys. It's a whole new regime. And then they hired like Butch Berry, Henley.
They hired like 4 Mike McDaniel guys.
It's like, okay, so they still kind of do this thing. It's the NFL. Connections matter, and it has mattered to McDaniel so far. And it has mattered in free agency to Joe Ortiz. Yeah. Ravens West. I mean, we got Hayden Hurst. Obviously, we got Tyler Conklin from the Chad Alexander connection.
Bradley Bozeman.
Yeah, better. Yeah. This one will be the connection on offense.
Yeah, this one will actually go better. I promise.
I swear this is the one that actually worked this time. Generally, like solid production overall. This past year, not as much, more so in 2024. High level yak ability. I really liked him initially because the Chargers were staring down the barrel of no Steven Anderson returning. So I'm like, okay, where's kind of that H-back potential option for them? And him at Coastal Carolina, I think he was my third. And then Chigakonkwo, who we'll talk about in a bit, was my tight end 4. Just like what he was able to provide. And I do like him more than Okonkwo overall. This guy has been top. Not that PFF grades are everything, but I have no other way to evaluate run blocking. So he's been top 20 in 3 of the 4 years that he's been tight end. I think 1 year he was like 50-something. I don't know. We'll blame Greg Roman or something for that one. But he was number 1 in run blocking in 2021. I lied. That is a Greg Roman year. So thank you, Greg Roman, I guess. 2025 production was it dropped. I'm not really sure why. And then again, as you mentioned, why did they prioritize Mark Andrews? I'm always just kind of worried. Like, what do you know that we don't? Why did you look at the two and go, yeah, let's give Andrews that big contract and let Likely walk? I don't really know what happened there. Is that really his OTC evaluation?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to buy that jersey as soon as we log off the show, because I just think Gadsden is a great receiving option tight end for them. We'll talk about Darren Waller in a bit, but I just think Likely can be a good complement to him. Still, a decent receiving option with him, but I think there's some blocking there that also Gadsden could work with.
Yeah, the over the cap valuation of $5 million, I think, is an indication of how low 2025 was for him in terms of his production. He was injured. There was a foot injury, and I think you see that impact his ability just overall as an athlete. I mean, he's too young to be in an athletic decline to go from 6 yards yak per reception in basically every season of his career, and then 4.5 this past season. So I do think that the injury is showing up there overall for the production and for the price tag. Again, Greg Rosenthal mentioned that he thinks he's going to get a pretty significant payday. So I wouldn't put too much, stock into that $5 million APY. But I do think you're not going to be. A lot of fans have brought up like Kyle Pitts. I think if you're trying to get Kyle Pitts out of Atlanta, you got to pay him like significant money. And I don't think you're going to have to pay likely that kind of money, but you're going to have to pay him a good contract, whether it's like middle of the pack, tight end 2, tight end 1 money, we'll see. But I do think that this kind of skill set alongside Gadsden is really what I'm looking for. I don't have any sources here, but I have a hunch that Mike McDaniel is going to do a lot more 2 tight end sets in LA than he did with the Miami Dolphins. And some of that is the skill set. Some of that is that he had Alec Ingold versus having like a tight end kind of type. But all of his tight ends in Miami played a lot, and they all got targeted, not significantly. Like they're not, Trey McBride targets, obviously. But you're going to need more complementary pieces than just Gadsden and Tucker Fisk, where it's like Gadsden is your receiver and Fisk is your blocker. You probably need multiple effective pass catchers to run what Mike McDaniel is going to want to run, I think. And so you look at, what the 49ers have done for years with George Kittle and then Kyle Juszczyk, and obviously Juszczyk is a fullback, but they're just able to be used in a variety of different ways where both of them can get vertical. Both of them can catch screens. Both of them can catch passes over the middle. You're going to want to have versatile pass catchers. And I think Likely has shown a really unique ability to create yards after the catch for you. So Gadsden can do all of the vertical work and Likely can do all of the short area work. They both can catch screens. They're both athletic. They both can, flex out to the slot. I think, some of this will be like you're probably not maximizing Gadsden fully if you go and get an Isaiah Likely type, but you're just creating so many potential mismatches that way because Likely and Gadsden can do all the receiver stuff and they can do all the tight end stuff, and it just gives Mike McDaniel a ton of flexibility from designing his passing offense and kind of jumping into the multiple tight end sets that Kyle and Sean McVay have been doing for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, it does not stop you from tendering, Tucker Fisk. So if you have Likely, Gadsden, and Fisk,
that's a great tight end spot.
I feel good. I feel really good about that 1, 2, 3. I probably said the same thing about Conklin, Disley, Hurd, and all those guys last year. But you know what? This is a draft prior guy, so it's just gonna be a little better.
Yeah, this is definitely somebody that we want. We wanted the Chargers to draft, and we went to the Ravens, and it worked out.
Yeah.
So it just complements, him and Gadsden, I think would work so well together. And Chigo Okonkwo is also on this list, and we'll talk about him in a second. But same kind of idea there.
Yeah.
So Chigo Okonkwo is next. I wasn't sure if he was the next on the slide or previous. I think the concern with Chig versus Likely is the run blocking aspect of things. Like if you search Chigo Okonkwo online, you see all his great receiving highlights, and then you see all the Titans fans complain about how bad he was as a blocker. So I think that part is different. This is definitely more of a receiving tight end first and foremost. 56 receptions, 560 yards this past season, 2 touchdowns, 6.2 yak per reception, which was 6th best overall among tight ends, 1.3 yards per route run. The yak is the key thing for Chig. It is what he has made his potential money out, as coming out of Tennessee, over 5.0 yards per yak per reception every season of his career. Only 4 drops the last 2 seasons, which is fantastic. I think you're getting a very effective tight end 2 receiver type if you get Chigo Okonkwo in here. His average season is about 500 yards receiving, just very consistent in that regard, very consistently good in the yak department, drops, etc. You have this Still/Bowman connection at Maryland. Obviously, Bowman is leaving, but that is kind of a connection that the Chargers have leaned into. You put too much overlap with Gadsden on here. What are your thoughts about that versus Likely complementing Gadsden?
I just believe in Likely going back to college as more of a blocker. With Okonkwo, it was always, it's a pretty decent receiving option, right. Kind of more slender guy. I'm pretty sure, definitely at least on tape back then, not so much the blocker as you mentioned. the reputation, I guess, around Okonkwo is not as strong of a blocker. So to me, not that you can't have fun having two good receiving tight ends. And if that's what they're open for, like they're great. That's what they want to do. I have no problem with that. But I would like to diversify just a little bit where it's not two receiving tight ends. At the same time, I think everyone thinks in the NFL that development is very linear. We saw with Gadsden what he could do in that middle stretch of the season. Then it was a kind of hit and miss, for the rest of the way. You can blame a lot of things on that, but some of that was that rookie wall. It's possible that Gadsden doesn't have a great 2026 season, and we think all these amazing things about him, and it just doesn't work out. I remember when Thule had his rookie year, everyone's like, okay, here comes the 80 pressure, 15 sack season, because oh my God, look at his rookie year. We just never really hit that. So if they think, okay, we believe in Gadsden, but we don't necessarily want to put all of our eggs in that basket, that a day 3 pick who does have a history of injuries can continue this, real strong ascension. I don't mind if they go like double dip at receiving options, but I think likely, even though, and the valuation is very much, reflects who's a better receiving option, but likely what you lose in some of that, you do gain a lot more as a blocker.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Again, Chig he's probably a little more one-sided than what McDaniel is specifically looking for with Gadsden. And I think Gadsden can become, a more effective blocker, but I don't think he can be like a true inline tight end, kind of, just do it all every single snap kind of player. I just don't think the blocking was like that good. Like it was a much better than I thought he was going to be coming into the NFL, but just don't think he has the skill set or the body type to truly be like a blocking kind of tight end.
Yeah.
So Chig is definitely, I think he's on my radar just because of the receiving skill set potential here. But if you have these two players and then you keep Tucker Fisk, you're kind of in a similar spot to where last year, where if Fisk was on the field, you probably knew they were running. And that was like the main reason, I think why you want to kind of diversify your tight end room a little bit more this year. But you're probably back to that spot if you sign Chig Okonkwo, because he's not blocking at all.
Yeah, I don't think so. Now, Gadsden gained whatever number of how much weight he gained in the span of one offseason. I'm sure he even bulked up again. But Okonkwo out of Maryland was listed at 238. So not quite a big option.
Yeah. There's a lot of Tyler Linderbaum chatter going on. For anybody who's like joining just right now live, I did offensive lineman on a previous show. Today is exclusively like skill players that we're talking about. We're talking about weapons for today. If you want to go back and watch the offensive line episode after this, feel free to go do that. But yes, we are very interested in Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah, have to be, given the connections. I think for me, we've talked about defensive options and retaining guys. We've talked about you talked about offensive linemen. I think the third thing for me are these skill position players, more kind of shoring up the group than revolutionizing the group. There's just not really an option that I'm aware of out there. So to me, it's re-sign your defensive guys, maybe add another guy on defense, add offensive linemen like crazy in free agency.
Yes.
And then this is the sprinkle in the rest of it group.
Yeah, I agree. Next on the tight end list is David Njoku, who recently posted on Instagram that he is not coming back to Cleveland, or going back to Cleveland, I should say. So what are your thoughts about potentially signing David Njoku in free agency?
That's dangerous. And while I do think he was a phenomenal talent and athlete, and the ceiling of what he has done before is extremely high, he's an incredibly talented individual. The injuries seem to be kind of catching up to him. We had kind of heard some stuff too, that it's a bit of a glass situation here moving forward with him. And while I think, we're all guilty of thinking big name, former production, get this guy in a new situation, wow, he's going to return to that form. I personally am worried about the wheels really falling off, and it's already been lowered. It's not like the whole Browns offense was terrible and Njoku was part of it just not being great, because the quarterback situation great. Harold Fannin had a great year, and they found a way to get him involved. No problem with Njoku, with the season-ending injury as well. I just don't hate it. It's not going to be incredibly expensive. Apparently the valuation, which we haven't really done over the cap valuations before. We usually wait for like the PFF valuations, which are pretty good. But it has them at 5.147 million APY. Not the worst thing. I worry about having one guy, I think Gadsden had at least one, if not two, season-ending injuries. Someone like Njoku, who the wheels could fall off at any time. It's just a bit of a glass tight end situation for me that I'm worried about.
Yeah, so he essentially dealt with a knee injury all season long this year and then missed the last 4 games. Also missed week 8, also missed week 7. And then last year ended the season with a knee injury. He's dealt with several ankle injuries. Several ankle injuries. So it is definitely showing up. I think you look at his statistics from early in his career, and there was one year he was averaging like 13 yards per reception, and then the next year was like 12 and a half. Like he was such an explosive tight end. And then this past season, I think that number puts him around 8 yards per reception. Still good, but it is definitely not somebody at the peak of his powers. And I think what Joe Ortiz has shown us is that if you do have these kind of medical concerns, for the most part, outside of one particular player, he's generally going to try and avoid risk as much as he can in free agency. And David Njoku strikes me as somebody who, if he hits, like, he could have a lot of upside, but this could also turn into like a week 4 situation where we just might not ever see him again. So I do think that there's a lot of risk here with the health and his age and, getting the player on the wrong side of his career. But if he does actually only cost $5 million, I could see the Chargers being more interested in that, just given the price tag.
Yeah. Yep.
Next on here, Mr. Darren Waller, connected obviously via Baltimore, where he was initially, spending the bulk of his career. They also would have had Andy Bischoff connection, but they let Andy Bischoff go.
Yeah.
And then he obviously spent this past season in Miami. He's very close to Frank Smith, so I think that was a big part of that. But at the end of the day, like, Mike McDaniel called plays for him. And as we just mentioned, they have several other Miami Dolphins assistant coaches in line with him. And I think we saw firsthand when he played the Chargers that he is still plenty athletic enough despite his retirement. We'll see how interested he is in continuing to play. But he will be 34 this year, so there is definitely some risk there. For the most part, I feel like he's been pretty healthy. It's just been, he decided to retire and then came out of retirement after failing as a rapper. So I have some question marks here just in potentially doing this, but this kind of feels like the floor for me of receiving options if they want to go out and explore this kind of player with Oronde Gadsden, who, I know like Alex kind of compared him to that, coming out of the draft. So maybe there's a little bit too much overlap here. But I think this is probably just more of something bringing up a connection versus like actually being interested in signing him.
Yeah, this is if I get the notification on the first or second day of free agency, Darren Waller signs with the Chargers, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I bet, sure, it's not going to let me jump up and down for joy. I will say, I kind of thought this was not a joke, but I mean, he retired, failed rapper, and what's happening here?
Yeah.
What Darren Waller's returning? They're going to go acquire Darren Waller, and to put up 24 catches, 283 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 9 games is no joke. Whatever Mike McDaniel thought of, whatever this rationale was, they had a plan for him, and I thought that he got open plenty against the Chargers. Tua couldn't hit him, but Darren Waller was getting open. McDaniel knew how to use him pretty early, and I think that means something. So, is the stat line going to be a little bit better in 2025 or 2026? I think it's possible if he signs from the jump, but this is, like you said, a good floor signing.
I'm just looking up ESPN open score among tight ends. Waller was 14th this last season. So not half bad there. He was ahead of guys like Juwan Johnson and Isaiah Likely, Travis Kelce, Chigo Okonkwo, Oronde Gadsden, Golston Loveland. So, 14th is not half bad there. All right. Next one on the list here, Mr. K. Dot. And this is definitely more of your blocker who can catch tight end, who is, very effective in both of those regards. This is a guy coming off of one of his best seasons with 572 yards, only the 1 touchdown, but the Buccaneers receiver injuries, forced him into like a wide receiver 1 role for several weeks during the season. He does have 3 straight seasons over 550 yards, which is really, really good. To me, this provides some balance between who you have in Arana Gadsden and what you kind of need with a very, well-rounded player who can block and catch passes.
Yeah.
The drops have been very low. Drop percentage, I think, his career was at 6%. So he's not somebody who is going to, leave you hanging from a pass catching standpoint. This is also a guy who's probably not much better of an athlete than Will Dissly was from a pass catching standpoint. The yak per reception numbers are not great. The open score is not great, but he will be a very sure-handed safety valve over the middle. He will catch some screens every once in a while. He's a good player in the red zone. So he can do just enough as a receiver to justify signing this kind of player. But the blocking is why you're paying Cade on. I think he's a fantastic blocker.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a better receiver than Will Dissly, and that. So you're looking for that. You're trying to upgrade over Will Dissly if you're signing Cade on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would be open to that. Very curious what Mike McDaniel wants to do here, but I'm open to Cade Otton. He's a player that I didn't love coming out of the draft. I think some of those athletic concerns were on tape. Not exactly the most explosive option, but he's turned himself into a very good option at tight end. About $10 million APY is pretty solid money. I think the high end right now is 18, 16.
Yeah.
So pretty solid contract for him. Doesn't quite break the bank. This feels like a nice addition. No connections that we're aware of, right?
No, none that I could find.
Okay.
There's just a lot of scheme familiarity here where, the Buccaneers have been the last few seasons doing like the Liam Cohen Rams kind of, play calling universe. So there's just a lot of familiarity that way, as opposed to like direct connections there.
Mm-hmm.
Next here is Charlie Kolar, again, another Raven here. Not a ton of pass catching production here. He had 142 yards, 2 touchdowns this season though. But he was Baltimore's tight end 3. And I think you're essentially trying to get a younger Will Dissly, again, that same kind of thing, who is a blocker, can run some routes. I think actually at Iowa State, that's what he was more well known for. So this is definitely a cheaper option who can take some of the blocking, aspect away from Arana Gadsden while maybe having a little bit more pass catching upside than he was given an opportunity to show in Baltimore.
This has Joe Hortiz written all over it. I don't know if McDaniel wants him, but if Greg Roman were still here, this has Chargers Joe Hortiz stuff written all over it. And in this case, again, 10 catches, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. There's more to mine here, I think. I think you and I felt he was, I don't know, round 3, round 4 sort of option. You saw the upside, but kind of was that middle-ish round, maybe top 100 kind of player. I did consider him a decent power slot option if possible, but no, as a good, like, bigger body blocking option, totally fine. I think this is if you've got $5 to put on a player, I mean, it feels like Charlie Kolar to the Chargers is potentially something that could happen. So it's not going to make me jump up and down, but it feels very likely.
Nice. I think if you're signing Charlie Kolar as your tight end 2, I think you're probably penciling in a tight end in the draft also, where you're trying to get some, day 3 value again, Arana Gadsden-esque there. So I want the Chargers to be a little bit more aggressive among tight ends, but like you said, I would not be that surprised if we ended up with Charlie Kolar as a potential Charger, not in the first wave of free agency, maybe like the second wave. Probably the second wave. I would hope. I would hope they're not like first waving Charlie Kolar. But I think they have a good opportunity here to upgrade at tight end and give Gadsden a nice compliment in free agency.
Yeah, everyone. I know we get super chats all the time. It's like, well, they can do Owe, Mac, Linderbaum, and Zion. It's like, yeah, they theoretically could. You're kind of signing up for Charlie Kolar then as your other addition, perhaps these kind of lower options.
Yeah. And that's how the Chargers ended up with Tyler Conklin in the first place, is they had to go spend elsewhere.
Yes.
All right. Moving to some running backs here. Have to bring up Raheem Mostert for several connections here. I forgot to edit the LVR that should say MIA. Obviously, him being he was a
Raider this year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you like about Raheem Mostert?
Oh, well, I like that he was good at kickoff returns. He was 29.3 yards per kickoff return, is 8th in the NFL. if they're looking for more of a running back at returner, I think that makes some sense. And then clearly just the Miami Dolphins connection. I truly think running back 1, running back 2 are set. I think you have Hampton, Vidal. There's no reason in my mind to think that those 2 guys can't be a very good, not just good, but value options for them at running back. That's why we're not starting this off with Breece Hall, because I think they have their 1. I think they have their 2. So who else can you bring in kind of to supplement them? And there's a couple other names we'll mention, but Mostert, I think, as the guy who understands the run game coordinators coming in Henley, who understands Mike McDaniel, who can be a mentor for them and also be a great kickoff return option for them at running back, I think is a really nice piece for them to add. That'll cost barely anything. Yeah, he'll be age 34 this year. You're not asking him to tote the rock over and over and over and over and over again. I don't think he even has a ton of pure wear and tear as a runner. I don't think he's been heavily featured over and over again. This is not someone I'm expecting to be a great rushing running back for them. Well, he was 4.7 yards per carry this year. Bring him as a veteran, bring him as familiarity, bring him in as a returner, and I think you get a nice little value for him there.
Yeah, I like that. I think there are some other running backs in here that you could potentially talk me into in terms of like the kickoff returner. Like Amir Abdullah is a free agent. There's just no connections there, so I didn't put him on here. I honestly kind of forgot that Raheem Mostert was this good as a kick returner. I think 2024 was pretty similar as well, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely an older guy. Usually we would not be, putting a 34-year-old running back on the screen here. But connections, kick returner ability, I think make this as a worthwhile option for the Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely more of like a vet minimum contract. That's why we don't have anything on the contract prediction there.
Yeah, this is like a Haskins replacement.
Yeah. If hypothetically the Chargers wanted to add some running back to competition, I don't have to sell Tyler on this, but Rachaad White is probably my choice here. I know that, again, there are a lot of people who are wanting the Chargers to go get a player who's better than Omari Hampton. I just don't think we're being accurate on Omari Hampton, if that's how you feel. Somebody in the chat said trade Hampton for Devon Achane. Like, no, thank you. I think Omari Hampton is going to end up being one of the 5 best running backs in the league shortly here in the next couple of seasons. But as we mentioned on the previous show, the Dolphins threw a shit ton of receptions towards Devon Achane. And some of that is Devon Achane, some of that is the offense, some of that is Tua. But in general, this kind of offense likes to use running backs who can catch the football out of the backfield, run routes, execute choice routes, things like that. And while Rachaad White didn't have a ton of production this past season, he had over 9 yards yak per reception in each of the 2 previous seasons, 10 total touchdowns. One season he had over 450 yards receiving. Another season was over 500 yards receiving. He was at that time one of the most effective receiving running backs in the NFL. Again, a lot of the Tampa Bay offense fell off a cliff this past season, and that unfortunately included him. There was an ankle injury, if I'm not mistaken, and obviously Bucky Irving kind of takes over that entire backfield. So he's never been the guy in the backfield, which is why you're not paying him a ton of money. But this is a guy who can, catch passes in the best way possible with Mike McDaniel. I think you could get him in for an RB3 kind of contract, just depending on where you're at there. Maybe Mike McDaniel has some concerns about Kamani Vidal and his ability to catch passes. And so Rachaad White could be your RB2/3. So you like Rachaad White a lot coming out of the draft. I think his receiving ability in the NFL has been really, really effective. And I think if the Chargers are going to go out and pay some kind of veteran running back a decent contract, I think I would want it to be somebody who has legitimate receiving chops, and Rachaad White definitely has that.
Yeah, that was why I liked him so much coming out of the draft. The running stuff was great. I thought better zone rusher than anything, but the receiving stuff, what he could do with the ball in his hands, that athletic ability, that's what made him special. I think coming out of that class, he was number 1 in yards per route run. What happened?
Jim Harbaugh and Mike McDaniel are courtside at the Lakers game tonight.
Oh, I need that mic'd up ASAP. I need them to stop the game and just put a microphone in front of them. That's way more entertaining. Yeah. Big fan of Rachaad White coming out of the draft. I think it'd be nice to have someone who under their belt has had a 1,500, 1,600 total yards season. I think he has 4,000 total scrimmage yards the last 4 years. That's a nice veteran option for them. Vidal, I'm really excited about Vidal this year. I really, really am. But if they're not internally, with the new staff, if they're not as excited, I don't mind this at all. I think if you turn him into, your receiving option, great. I think someone mentioned, I think it was PFF that had him as like a Jamal Williams kind of option for the Chargers, or not for the Chargers, just generally in the NFL. I mean, I don't mind that. Him joining the Chargers, I think would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So yeah, I think people are far too low on Marion Hampton right now. He's going to be really awesome in Mike McDaniel's offense.
Mm-hmm.
Last one here is a fullback. To see what happens with the Chargers in this regard, where you have what Jim Harbaugh has usually preferred at fullback, which is like a defensive tackle convert or a fullback who's very large himself.
Mm-hmm.
And what Mike McDaniel has featured at fullback, again, the aforementioned Kyle Juszczyk, or also Alec Ingold, that kind of player. Reggie Gilliam fits more of the McDaniel type than the Harbaugh type. And he's also like the only veteran fullback that's a free agent.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Patrick Ricard is a free agent. One, does he end up really being a free agent? And two, is that what they want? And to me, the answer, I think historically would be no. Now, McDaniel said and Harbaugh have said they want to meld things together and blend these things together. So maybe you get a giant fullback in McDaniel's offense, and that's the blend we see. I don't know. To me, though, you got to keep guys like this on the radar. The Dolphins have negative $16 million in cap space.
Sure.
They have a new regime. Same pass game coordinator now as their offensive coordinator, but it is possible that Alec Ingold, because I think they can save $4 million by cutting him, it's possible he becomes available, and then at that point, you are just circling that as an option for the Chargers. That's a very easy dot connection. But if not, and of course, if the Bills let him go, I think if they want a more natural fullback, Gilliam is basically your other option.
Yeah, there's not a lot here. He was the pusher of the Bills push, and so his run blocking grade is like super high because that was the majority of his role. But this is a guy who in the past has had a real effective role. This past season didn't get a ton of true opportunities in that regard, so he's probably the main one. I don't know how much contract value to really put into somebody like Reggie Gilliam or somebody like Alec Ingold, but I think we will see a change at fullback because, Scott Matlock, hey man, like I never expected him to make somebody miss an open space like he did this year on that one flat reception against the Chiefs. But you're just not fooling anybody. If Matlock is on the field 90% of the time, you are running the football. And the Chargers are going to want somebody who can do something kind of different there, whether that's a tight end who can play fullback kind of type or an actual fullback like Ingold or somebody like that. I think we'll see them make some changes in that regard. I was messaging back and forth with Thomas Martinez for what it's worth, who's very well into the draft and is in the chat tonight about fullbacks because Lance Zierlein was talking about Indiana fullback / tight end Riley Nowakowski, who is
hell yeah.
Yes, he's very much like a Juszczyk jack of all trades who can do tight end stuff and fullback stuff. So if you're watching Indiana this year, keep an eye out for number 37. And I think this is somebody that the Chargers could potentially keep an eye on. There is also a Bredesen from Michigan who fits more of the Harbaugh type if they wanted to go back to the Michigan well.
Man, Nowakowski, that's a Hall of Fame fullback name if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, love it.
That's fantastic. Nowakowski for Hampton, leading the way for Hampton. That's great. Doesn't quite like Neil Tomlinson, a little easier to say, but Nowakowski Hampton is pretty fun too.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. Pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
and listen, hey, Reggie Gilliam has almost the exact same colors and number as another fullback, Bobby Hawley from LA Tech. Number 41, almost the identical jerseys.
Just never gonna forgive that one.
No one has any idea what I'm talking about, by the way.
No.
Like Kevin Kernick, if he's in here, would know, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm just bummed that happened during COVID because we heard about the Bobby Hawley Denzel Perryman hit, and it would have been great to see and hear in person if that were ever possible. But that was the COVID year, so yeah. So yeah, Alec Ingold gets released. I guess keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I hope so. The Dolphins are screwed in terms of cap space, so hope it works.
Yeah.
I did make that connection, Thomas, when I looked him up. Yes.
No, it's definitely not what you expect just by your
no. Does not look like a Janikowski or anything. It's no.
But by all accounts, it sounds like it's a good tight end class. I don't know how many other fullbacks besides Nowakowski and Bredesen there are. Obviously, Thomas can bring up some other names if he wishes. And if you're not following Thomas on Twitter and reading his stuff on Sports Illustrated, I definitely encourage you to go do that. He is one of my go-tos for the draft, and we're fortunate enough to work with Alex Katzen as well. So between Katzen and Thomas Martinez, if I ever have any questions about prospects, they are my guys. So definitely encourage you to go give him a follow online.
Yep. Deepest knowledge bag for Chargers draft related content in the business, those two.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Tyler, any other final thoughts before we finish out with some of these super chats today?
No, let's jump in.
All right. Daddy Don't Pull Out says, quickly though, Raiders hiring Norv than McCoy though. It's so funny that they continue to do.
They hired Norv too?
Yeah. After they fired Josh McDaniels, they promoted Scott Turner to offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And then they brought Norv in as like a consultant.
Is he still there though?
No. I don't think
so. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, okay. But yes.
But McCoy was just hired by I was gonna say Kingsbury. It's not Kingsbury. Kubiak.
Yeah, I saw that. I listen, McCoy can build a hell of a staff, at least I can tell you that. I don't know. He made the Titans semi-competitive against the Chargers last year.
They were much more competitive under Mike McCoy than they were under Brian Callahan. That is sad, but true.
Mike McCoy still has more Chargers playoff wins than Brandon Staley and Jim Harbaugh combined.
Sad.
That is very sad.
CJD 8009 wants to know what are our ideal first and second round picks if you have any.
I genuinely might not watch any receivers or corners. To me, if it's a fat guy in the middle on either side of the football, and I'm good with that.
Yeah. I think your first three picks in the draft have to be trenches, like whether it's 2 defense, 2 offense, and 1 defense, 1 offense. I don't particularly care. If you don't sign any free agent tight ends and you wanted to take a tight end, that early in the draft, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. But I'm of the mindset that defensive tackle, guard/center, and edge rusher should be your first 3 picks this year. Your situation from last year, Kilimak gets hurt, Deshaun Hand gets hurt. Obviously, like the tackle situation, you cannot go into next season with the amount of depth that they did not have this past year. So give me a lot of picks in the trenches the first three rounds this year.
100% agree.
Case Wilson wants to know our thoughts on someone like Leo Chenal if we lose Perryman / etc.
Not that I'm necessarily opposed, but I have to learn more about him. Loved him coming out of the draft, but I don't know. I'm probably going to oversell Marlo Wax all off season, but I'm going to oversell Marlo Wax all off season. I just think it's been a minute since we had that UDFA become a starter on defense. I don't know, man. I'm kind of thinking he's that guy.
Yeah, I'm kind of set with the linebackers. I mean, if they wanted to go upgrade in the draft in what sounds like a great draft class, I'm not super opposed to that. But I'm just not super interested in spending a lot of money on a linebacker. Like Devin Lloyd is my favorite Utah player like of all time. And I'm good. Like I don't have any interest in them paying him that kind of contract. So that should tell you how little I want to spend at linebacker. I just don't think it's how you maximize this defense. Like they need so much help with the trenches right now, especially if Kilimak retires or you lose it off Aowe or whatever. I just don't think linebacker is where I really want to see them spend money.
Yeah. Just wait, is there one more? Yeah, there is. Never mind, I'll wait.
Okay.
One more super chat.
Yeah. Uncle Kevo says Eagles O-line coach quit. Would have loved to hire him. So he's still on the Eagles.
Yeah.
They're essentially forcing him to like take a leave of absence while not firing him. So it's really tricky. They hired a different offensive line coach, but are not letting him out of his contract. So he's not even available to go elsewhere. A team would essentially have to hire him as a head coach in order to pull him away from Philadelphia, is what I can understand. So, really, really just not a great situation for a coach that's probably on the hot seat to let the best offensive line coach, bicker with him and make him not coach your team. So it's just really weird situation overall.
I can't even imagine the rioting if the Chargers. So that happened to the Chargers. Like, we have Jeff Stoutland. Oh, just kidding. We're gonna make him a advisor. Okay, sure.
Yeah, that's insane, man. It's insane to me. And there's been reports that Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson are both considering retiring, and you're gonna lose, and you're essentially firing Jeff Stoutland. Like, crazy to me.
Yep, they'll be trading AJ Brown.
Goodfella just popped in here and says we should have gone for Cliff Kingsbury instead of Gase. We would have had a nice option for OC next year if McDaniel's decides to leave. Definitely
surprised Kingsbury didn't get an OC job, but
yeah.
Instead of Gase, would I have preferred Kingsbury over Gase as pass game coordinator? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Matt Nagy getting offensive coordinator spots and Cliff Kingsbury was not on my bingo card.
No, not one bit.
Not one bit at all. All right. Did you have another thought that you wanted to give before the super chats?
Yeah, just because we didn't jump into, or I didn't get to jump into the offensive line stuff with you. Have you convinced yourself on McGovern or anybody else over Linderbaum?
I think Tyler Linderbaum, like the chance that you get an elite center is most likely with Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah.
But you're probably saving like $10 million per year if you sign McGovern, and you're not getting a significant drop off. You're not getting like a potential all-pro center, but you're getting a potential Pro Bowler and somebody who can, stabilize things for the little bit, the next couple of years. Obviously, McGovern is older, but it would be really nice to be able to get a high-end center and then also get a high-end guard because you choose to save that money there. But there's been some reports like Jonathan Jones came out and said yesterday that if the Ravens do let Tyler Linderbaum walk, that the Chargers are going to be first in line. There's been some reports that the Giants will be in that conversation. Potentially the Seahawks will be in that conversation. So John Harbaugh, and his mentees are all going to be fighting over Tyler Linderbaum, apparently.
NFL cap space by team. Let's see who. The Seahawks have a lot of money.
The Seahawks have a shit ton of money. Yeah,
they do have a lot of money.
They have a lot of free agents on defense, though, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, same for the Chargers. But okay, so it's and listen, I would get it if he picks the Seahawks instead of the Chargers.
Yeah, you just won the Super Bowl, so
yeah, can't really.
The Seahawks don't necessarily like need a center. They did draft one last year in like the 6th or 7th round or whatever, but he's not Tyler Linderbaum. I'm telling you that. And you're losing your offensive coordinator who kind of maximized the offensive line. They could very easily pivot the current starting center into a backup role, and you get Gray Zabel next to Tyler Linderbaum. I think that's a pretty good situation there. So I think it's really good news for the Chargers that they have options, whether it's Linderbaum or McGovern. I think both of those guys seem likely to hit free agency right now. And if they end up with Tyler Linderbaum, I'm super happy with that. But McGovern saves you $10 million per year. Not opposed to that at all. What about you?
I don't know yet, but I understand both. I'm glad there are options, and I'm glad there are more options than there were last year, both in terms of scheme fit and then financial options. I'm sure every time I read your tweets, dude, I see someone bring up the Drew Dahlman thing. I don't think people understand the difference between good player and scheme fit. You never said that. Anyway, it annoys me. I can't imagine how you must feel, but I'm glad there are options for the Chargers this year, even if there's no Linderbaum. I'm happy with either, but I understand if you want McGovern and weapon that we talked about today versus just Linderbaum, I'd understand why you'd want to go with the two players versus the one.
Yeah, I'm so sick of. I had to mute the word Dahlman at this point.
So people are so stupid.
Yeah, everybody wants to act like scheme fit doesn't matter, and then every single team in the NFL talks about scheme fit at every single chance they get. Yes. And they all sign players they know, and they all hire coaches they know, and it would be great if every single NFL team were just like, let's get good players and good coaches in the building. But the reality is that scheme fit matters a ton to these teams making big decisions, and Greg Roman does not run a scheme that is very Drew Dalman friendly. Mike McDaniel does. So if Dalman were a free agent this year, I'd be all about it. Yeah, that's a great scheme fit. But the Bears ran like 70% outside zone this year. Why do you think Dalman was so good? If he were with the Chargers, he would not be as good because they would be running a very poor scheme for him.
No, I remember when you tweeted that or messaged something about that. I remember Duke Manyweather was like either commented or liked it or something that Drew Dalman was not a scheme fit. Yeah. So at least take it from that guy's word.
If you don't listen to me, listen to Duke Manyweather.
Yeah, if he believes it's not a scheme fit, it's probably not a scheme fit.
Yeah. So there are always players who are scheme versatile in every draft, but you're talking about the top 1% of their position. Like, we all love Corey Linsley very fondly, but Brandon Thorne, his biggest complaint about Corey Linsley was that he was not scheme versatile, that he was a guy who needed to be in a zone, friendly kind of scheme. And that was why he wasn't like an all pro kind of player for Brandon Thorne all those years. So again, it's not just us, but is what it is.
On that note,
there's my rant about Drew Dalman. Still so annoying that I get those mentions every now and then.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Appreciate you so much for tuning in on a Thursday night. We will be back next week with some defensive free agents. Hopefully, at some point soon, we get an announcement of the Chargers coaching staff being finalized. That would be great. The Ravens finalized theirs today. The Titans have finalized their coaching staff as well. So hopefully that notifications comes through at some point soon. We appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Until next time, as always, Bolt up.